All right, we're ready to go. Thanks everybody. I know it's after lunch. Everybody, they've had their food and ready to rock and roll and be all enthused for the rest of the afternoon. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me here. Hold on a minute here. Just gotta, everybody else taking pictures and doing all that sort of stuff. Smile. All right, that'll be a good one. All set aside. As I said this morning, we were talked a little bit. Our stuff and what we do is a little different. I tried to put together some slides here this morning because the whole scope of what I was trying to do or talk to, I think, kind of changed with what everybody was doing and saying up here. It is very helpful. There's some great technologies. If I do my job here, I'm going to kind of give you guys a different concept about what's going on in the market today. We're complementary to what everybody else is doing here, but we're completely different in the same context. So hopefully, if we go through this properly, we'll just do a quick introduction, which you're kind of doing now. Kind of talk a little bit about accommodation, which is what is predominantly done today in the market to get everything up to speed, and then talk a little bit about compliance and how we're more versed and how there are solutions out there that will help in the compliance piece versus accommodation. Talk about our technology a little bit because it sounds like I was given the go-ahead to do so. And I want to talk about another little piece of technology that really isn't PDF-centric, but Duff had asked if I could actually bring it up. And I got a couple cases of scenario that we've got the product in or similar to the solutions so that you guys can see the difference. Again, I talked this morning, we're Crawford Technologies. We're a 20-year-old company. Our core competencies originally were around around enterprise output management, archiving management solutions, interfaces to current archives, and ECM for your enterprise content management solutions. So we played in the data space with high-end databases, whether it be big data, things like that, and print output, transforming stuff that are being created, from mainframe systems, all that sort of stuff in generation, and pulling and inputting stuff into these ECMs or output management archives. Dealing with accommodation, I guess solutions for single tagging, template, alternative formats, one-off requests, certain things like that. So people are actually having to say, I need it, or disclose that they need it. There's nothing, wrong with that, but as everything is becoming more predominant and electronic, as we know, like statements, online statements, regulations, WCAG, saying that everything has to be accessible, changes that whole scope. If you're sending out 1 million statements a month and they all need to be accessible, the content in those statements is dynamic, which means it changes for every statement. So it becomes, it's not possible, not feasible, based on accommodation, right? So people have to disclose again, you take it and do things like that. So we're trying to deal with that a little bit differently. Current process, again, we'll just step through it, you guys all know it, but a customer has to call, request alternative formats because they're visually impaired. The information gets sent to a third party for remediation. And don't get me wrong, Adam and you guys, it's a service, we'll work with you guys and everything else, but I have to explain that this is all that everything that happens, right? The document gets remediated or printed, alt format returned, then sent back to the customer. For one, especially when you get into the government stuff, it's very personal, very sensitive information that's in these documents. They're being sent out, they're being brought back. Time-wise, they want it. It could sometimes take a week, 2 weeks turnaround time, depending on the context of it, right? By that time, the information they may need is gone by already. So again, in theory, it's an imperfect solution. Critical personal information, like I said, going to many different formats. It's got to leave the premise. And there's millions, as I mentioned earlier, millions and millions of transactional documents that are being delivered electronically daily. So how do we deal with that? Typically, the strategies have been focused on waiting for a request to accommodate clients and customers, why, right? Making all documents accessible, no need for disclosure of disability, and inclusion by design, okay? So that's more on the compliance piece, because in order to be compliant, as the word goes, when you say that everything on your website has to be accessible, like I say, the way it's done traditionally, you could not be compliant. It just doesn't happen. And like you say, some of the people have mentioned earlier that they're taking their PDFs off their website. I know State Farm in Canada, the big insurance company, when the regulations started to come down, they took everything off their website. So that's really not helping, right? just got to figure something out. We're getting closer with them, but that's not the answer. So because of us as a company, working with the data on an early side during the creation of print and or pulling from archives, and we're taking all that data, whether it be PDF or from an actual print stream, which is called AFP, or Metacode, which comes from Xerox, or any kind of format that creates or assembles this type of information, we can take it and we kind of, I guess for layman's words, is we just kind of rip all the data and everything else that's in that document and put it into kind of a raw form to where we can do anything with it. So it kind of makes sense. If we're already doing this and we're creating the PDFs or PDFA or any other format, whether it be XML, HTML, as an output, what if we could do something at that point? So that when it goes through, gets filtered, when the documents are being created, why can't we tag them there? And that's how this all came about. So for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working in that market, in that space, and we've developed a solution that we think does quite well in that aspect. So what we call is high-speed, high-volume automation, right? So the technology to make paper accessible is now available. I showed you guys that a little bit, and high-speed automation of accessible PDFs. So I didn't lose you guys yet, or what? Because it's harder to grasp. So your data centers and print shops are already producing this stuff. It's not rocket science. They're already being generated and everything else. The output flows are mailed to documents and archived for e-present and delivery already today, right? So it's not something that we're reinventing the wheel. That process is there, and these documents are already being created. So the concept here, right here where all the products are being generated, like I said, any formats, PDF, AFP, XML, ASCII, line data. The key piece is right here, tagged, read order, ICF configuration files. So what we do is we have a piece of software, and I'll show you a few of the screens after on what I'm talking about, but the concept is create some business rules here. A lot of people like to say template, the word template. I like to try to avoid it because it's really not a template, but in all essence, it's creating business rules through the process of production when this stuff is being generated. And then it comes out as an accessible PDF, and then can go to all the other types of formats and go to the client. So we also benefit here a little bit when you're creating an accessible PDF. In certain ways, we can create to many formats. So the same output that we're generating when we create the PDF can go out to creating a Braille, in the Braille print. So it can go to the Braille printers, it could go creating large print e-text. So it also is becoming a lot more efficient in that process too, and help save money, save time for everything that everybody that you're doing. It's a full spectrum for accommodation. So this is what we call our designer software. As you can see there, it just looks like a regular PDF statement. But on the fly, we've got, when we're going to go and tag this stuff, you're going to be able to see your results right there, right on the fly. So it makes it fairly intuitive and simple to use. And like I said, this really isn't a PDF at this point. It really isn't anything. We take the data, we present it. So we're going to be able to actually go in there and configure from the raw source and the raw parts of the file. So here's an example. If you look, everything that's going on, you can see the specs of the image, you can see the input elements that's going on, you can see the project that we're doing. But physically, you can see when we create a header, and you can see over here, the heading numbers, it'll tag it H1s, everything else is going on, and you can see the results as we're going on. So it just kind of gives you an idea, especially for you people that have worked with a lot of the software like Netcentrics and things like that. Tagging can be a process, and it's a little more difficult than a lot of people give it credit for. So at least we try to do it as visually as possible. And again, we're creating the configuration files so that anything that this has gone through, let me back up here. I wanted to show you the basis of this statement, and Matthew was bringing it up a lot when you got the presentation layer of the PDF. Essentially, when you're talking invoices and statements or tax forms or anything like that, that presentation layer, a lot of the stuff is artifact, pictures, graphics, headers, all that sort of stuff. So that the format of this document, outside of the data that would go in here that's specific to the customer, whether it be tables, how much they spent filling in all the columns and rows and the tables and the blank spots, it's just text, but it changes per customer. So the whole framework of this statement, we can essentially tag and format and have it as a preset configuration, so that the only thing that ends up going through when we're doing the high production is the texted data. And we can set rules on starts and set listeners for starts and stops, so that this could be like 3 pages long, 4 pages long, depending on the spending patterns and stuff like that. So essentially, you've got a perfectly formatted and tagged document. And if you've got 1 million of them, and you send 1 million of them through, they're all going to be perfectly tagged documents. And when we talked, I know somebody the other day was talking and mentioned the question, how people don't like PDFs, right? And that was the big comment the other day when we had the presentation. And how do we get some conformity to things like that? Problem is, if traditionally, say that they were doing a million documents, right? And inclusionary, what's even a rough number? Maybe 4%. So if you take 4% of those documents and you have to go and send them away to third-party remediators, every one of them could come back different. They could. I mean, you're going to have different people essentially touching them, doing them, depending on rules, because there's no conformity. So they all would be different. And that's becoming some of the problem, right? What is right, what is wrong? So when you only have to do it once, all the documents come out exactly the same. So I guess who was it I was talking to earlier? We were talking about this gentleman here. When you only have one person doing it, we were talking about where there's bottlenecks on having a PDF go or not go and be tagged properly. It's only as good as the person that's putting the input in and setting the rules, but when you only have to do it once and it's one person, if you feel that that's the rules that are done properly at that time, then they're all going to come out that way. So, another question. If you're already producing and storing PDF, why not store an accessible PDF or produce an accessible PDF? And why not make all paper accessible? And this is where I was talking about that piece of product that we had, the little barcode. We teamed up with a company from Japan called Korea, that creates the software, and we kind of, I guess what we used to say when we did it is put VoiceEye on steroids. VoiceEye's been around for a while. They've been used in single documents and a few things like say, 3 universities, publishers, a number of large corporations within Korea and stuff like that. And the fact that most people are using smartphones, they come up with a really good reader, which I can show you if you need it, or it's just free download. But with our transformation software, when you saw the outputs, we worked with VoiceEye and now can create the barcode on high speed, high volume as well. So what it does, makes paper accessible. It's got a high density barcode, holds up to about 250,000 characters. You can change contrast, font sizes, translation, via Google Translate, it's already integrated. Little things like turn-by-turn navigations from Google Maps, you know, the uptake is the challenge, right? You know, getting it out there and getting it in front of people is the more the merrier, and you know, hopefully if we could do it, we can get everybody, you know, doing the barcode, and it kind of makes it standard, I guess, of what we're trying to do. So this is that same statement we talked about earlier. Where are we at here? That's not working. If you see the barcode that you see there, that's it. Like I said, it's a very dense, very clear barcode, but it's not very big, and it just sits up in the top right-hand corner. You can put it anywhere, but you know, when we're trying to accomplish something, you know, for the visually impaired, they don't want to go looking everywhere on a page. So, you know, ideally it would be to have it in the same kind of spot on all types of documents. But the software is kind of nice. It will scan for it. You'll hear beeps. And as you get closer to the barcode, you know, the beeps will speed up, so you can navigate around the page in order to get it. But that little barcode holds up to 250,000 characters, like I said. So we can strip everything that's on that page, put it in a proper reading order. And again, that's, you know, when you're going to Braille or doing anything else, sending it out, it's already tagged in a proper format as well, so it saves time and effort and money. So this is kind of an idea of what the software would look like. You can magnify, you can change contrast, do voiceovers, and like I said, we can get it to go to Braille fairly quickly. Case studies. This is what I threw in here this morning. I guess it's seeing is believing and trying to gain concepts, and I know there's been a few people already approached me on this particular thing, and Adam had already talked about, you know, a lot of the stuff in the legislation that's going on in Canada right now. And he specifically was talking the provincial government, but we just recently did some work with the government of Canada, and internally within the government of Canada, there's the C-78 requires the government employees and pensioners, HR documents, all to be made accessible. So like we were talking about, it's all online documentation, but how do you make it all accessible? So accommodation wasn't going to work in this case. So we worked with them, and the big thing that they had, and we didn't really talk about, was when you're sending stuff out to a third party to get it remediated, and I'm sure you run into this all the time, man, is, you know, the confidential information piece. So the Canadian government was really, really strict on what they were going to do. So we ended up working out with them on site, and we're able to come up with a solution. You know, and this is where the compliance piece, it made them compliant, because now we met the laws, we provided for future communications, right, and compliance across all documents within their environment. So the remediation, what we did there, was the documents were composed and prepared, you know, for typical paper production like we were talking about, and mailings. The PDF documents have been hosted and delivered to all their government employees through a third party, what's called e-post, and it's a government electronic delivery post system. So the AFP and PDF documents are all produced, and thousands, I think we were, in that particular case, we were up to around 18,000 a month in the first phase of this. And they needed the thousands of documents for the SLA, was they were remediating in a 24-hour period, and you had to do it in multiple languages and some in bilingual. So as you can see, you know, doing that manually and trying to meet all those strict rules and guidelines, we're all accommodated using our stuff, and it's more instantaneous. These people are getting their turnaround right away, and the same, and everybody else is being generated. So it was kind of the same concept of what we were talking about earlier. The data, the raw data comes in from the Canadian government. Canada Post has the software, our stuff, that's generating the PDFs for online presentment. It goes through the software we were just talking about, you know, configuration files, creates the accessible PDF, and then it gets posted on their website. So everybody and everything is being tagged. Second case study, I mentioned credit cards. Well, actually, anybody have any questions based on this case study, or do you want me to just go on to the next one, and we can carry on that way?
Yeah, I'm curious. Is the output WCAG 2 conforming?
Yes. Yes.
So there's
both WCAG and PDF UA.
So in the barcode solution.
They're not doing the barcode solution in this. That is brand new technology that we're just talking to you guys about now.
Oh, I see.
In this one, it's strictly, now we're talking to them about it, but it's strictly the accessible PDF UA. Okay, for the output for the screen viewers. Second one gets into a little bit more on the scope of high volume. Company profile, it's for the purposes, none of them like you to use their name, but it's one of the large credit companies in the world, one of the top U.S. banks based in deposits. Their challenge, they required accessible online statement presentment for over 18 million customers. And they had lack of fidelity and duplicate information storage within their current system. So we were already in there doing a lot of that manipulation with the data. So the business benefits, yeah. Is that Duff? You tell him to get the heck out of here? So, a couple of the benefits of what we did, we exceeded performance requirements by processing close to 32 concurrent transactions a second. So speed was not a big deal, but it was when that was one of the huge requirements when you're doing multi-million documents, was it going to slow down, because you're doing extra processing. We provided, currently we do over 11 million online customer viewing e-presentment. And it's now been up and running for what, Jeff? Probably a year and a half, with some great success, and it just keeps growing. And dynamic transformation from print format to accessible PDF was what we were able to accomplish. With those 11 million online customers, just to give you an idea, there was 18 of those predetermined configuration files through that whole thing. So there was 18 of them. That's all that needed to be done at this point in time. So I guess I'm just flying through. What time did I have till? Hopefully you guys have a lot of questions.
You have another 20 minutes or so. We got questions.
Don's.
Don's.
Still design, Don's. Don's, monkey, Don's. Hey.
Yeah. So I guess the hardest part in all this is trying to get people to grasp, and hopefully I did an okay job, is, when I said earlier it was about being disruptive. It's a completely different way of thinking. It works complementary with what everybody else is doing in here, because, we're talking the high volume, high output stuff, not the static one-offs and all the marketing material and all that sort of stuff that people are currently doing today. So I feel that, there's going to be a place where we fit in quite well with everybody else that's here, and we can all work together. But it's understanding the fact that it's high volume, high output, that we can do all the documents and not just do one. It's, where people, they look at you, blue in the face, they just stare at you like, okay, what are you talking about? So if I could at least, put that message across, that it is different. It's not, perfect in the sense that I said we only do the high-speed high output at this point. So, any questions? I know it's Friday afternoon and we're getting a little late.
Stephen, how do you deal with that issue that
I don't know.
often have to redesign the documents in order to make them accessible? They have to be standardized, they have to be, we heard it from Ted, on the content level, they have have to be accessible. How do you deal with these issues?
No, like the document, with that designer that I showed you there, you're actually making the document accessible. With the software. You're making it, you're telling it whether you've got an H1, you're tagging what the headers are, you're doing what the tables are, you're setting all the rules and the regulations. So you're actually tagging it with that piece of software. If that makes sense. So you're creating a set of rules that make that document accessible. So you follow the guidelines, you do everything else that needs to be done, you create the reading order, all the contrast, colors, artifacts. One of the nice things we can also, because we have access to database if needed, we can pull the information as well. If there's pie charts, bar charts, that becomes dynamic and we can read all that dynamic content. So hopefully that answers your question, and the third one. So the software, we can take anything and whatever kind of information you want to bring into it, and then the software itself tags it based on the rules that you created. And then spits it out in the format you needed.
Steve, I have a question. You mentioned a PDF UA solution, and you mentioned that the barcode solution. Could you clarify what the relationship between those is?
As far as actual, I guess it would be, I'm not sure how to explain it. The barcode itself, the whole context behind it, was because we were already pulling and tagging and creating the reading orders within the document, that we were able to extrapolate that data and put it into the barcode for print. So that's been the focus at this point, is just being able to make that same document, the same concept of the reading orders, that the voice eye software could read it, and the person could, read it aloud, talk to it, change it, all those kinds of things that you people are doing now with the accessible PDF, with JAWS and all that sort of stuff. So we just try to take it one step further. Is there a correlation between the two? Other than when you do the creation, I don't see one, because they're two different things, right?
The reason for both is the fact that the PDF UA is great for online presentations and
Yes.
studios, but the voice eye barcode is for printed documents that have come through to somewhere. And with your smartphone, you can point at that document to be read at you rather than the electronic version.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm curious about is whether or not the structural aspects of the document, the headings and the tables, if that information is present in the barcode, if the barcode mediated solution.
Barcode could, without getting too much on the technical, we can discuss that further, because I'm like, Ted there, I'm not the real tech guy on that actual product, but it essentially, because you've done all that tagging and the reading orders with the headers and all that sort of stuff, we extrapolate, we take it out in a text type format.
Right.
So whether or not that there's a heading or a rule heading and stuff like that, I don't see where, because it's a piece of paper, I'm trying to get a grasp of where you're trying to get with that.
So I think it's really interesting. I think having listened to Duff, I think the point he's trying to convey is that accessing documents isn't just getting to the text. I think we've seen this throughout the talks. It's about being able to navigate the content, whether it's understanding of the table and the relationship between the table header and a cell within that table so that a user can navigate that table, whether it's moving through the headings of a document to interact with that document. So it sounds like that's potentially possible with this technology, but at the moment it's aimed at text interaction.
No, but the thing is the voice eye software is the only thing at this point that's going to read it. Okay, and it has the capabilities of manipulating through that document. I mean, I've seen it, not me personally, because I'm, just like, we had a gentleman the other day doing a demo on JAWS and how they manipulate through it. Anybody that we've seen use it, based on their phones, whether it be iPhone or whatnot, had no problems manipulating through the columns, headers, text. So I don't know, outside of getting tactical, that is being accommodated for. Yeah, otherwise it would just be a whole list of gibberish, right?
Well, no, it'd be a word worm. So they would-
Yeah, exactly, and it's not, you can manipulate through the document. But whether it's being tagged, and that's the answer that I don't have, because it's the voice eye software, it's a voice eye barcode, that it's interpreting things as that when it's doing it, whether it's a specific, so I think that answers the question more on whether it's the same H1, H2 that all the screen readers. I would imagine at this point it's probably fairly proprietary, because it's their patented stuff at this point, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because as I understand it, it's using your software is for bulk, is for massive distribution of what do you call it, each.
Invoices, statements.
Yeah, I mean, but it would seem, I mean, it wouldn't make any sense giving 1 million PDF accessibility experts sitting and making one invoice at a time and sending it out. That would be pretty crazy. And the other kind of documents, it's typical longer documents. As I see it anyways, there's more, if you get a letter, a classic letter, the tagging is not as important as when you get a publication, because the letter is short.
That's not so much true if I get my back state.
Yeah, like if
Yeah,
you know, your insurance companies, your healthcare,
Sure.
banking now, it's
Sure.
all, you can go pull statements now
Yeah.
for the last 3 or 4 years.
Sure, I mean, if it's complicated with tables and stuff like that, then it's a whole different matter. But your solution is to, when you're sending in big volumes, sending out, then in my opinion, or my grasp of the thing is, it makes sense using your solution, right?
Yes, definitely.
You wouldn't buy it for server for making 5 for publication a year.
No.
That would be.
Now, you could,
Yeah.
but no, that doesn't make sense. And like I said, we're complementary to the services and the software that are currently doing one-offs. Like, because we're doing stuff that they can't do and vice versa, right?
I'm Pat from Norway. And this might not be for you, but rather for the other PDF guys, because as I understand it, you just tap into the print stream to the transactional printers and do stuff with the print stream to create accessible PDFs. So do you envision that PDF BT might have a role in this in the future? Or that you can actually make PDF BT/UA compatible file? Something
Well,
like that.
to answer the question, like I said at the very beginning, we've already been creating PDF, PDFA, and all of those types of formats already. We've been doing it for years. So these banks and stuff are using our technology already to do their e-presentments and create and generate those files. So for us, as these standards go and there's different choices coming out, it becomes what we would call another generator. You know, which would be just an add-on. Like, you know, if you wanted PDF, you wanted PDF, you wanted all of that, you could, with our same software package, generate all 3 of those concurrently. So, to answer your question, if it's there and it's a need and there's something, we could do it, yes. And keep in mind too, it's not just print stream. We can also take from an archive. There are applications, well, especially in that one with the credit card company, you know, for them to print and store every one tag. As the customer comes and they want to get a statement from 6 months ago, they click on the button. When it goes to repopulate, because we're taking that data that's in the archive, when it comes to repopulate, it has to regenerate. It's got to go through software to regenerate, to go on the screen. We'll tag it there. So we'll tag it on the fly. And that's not a print thing, that's being pulled from the archive. Yeah. And that's being the nice thing about our, like I said, with our company, having the ability and being in that place where we can have access to be able to tie into things like that. And I know when you and I had the conversation earlier, and what we do with Canadian government is exactly what you were talking about doing. We do all their tax forms, like the pay stubs, the pension statements, and all that sort of stuff. And that volume right now is only in and around, like Canada is really not that big. When you talk about people, employees in the government, we're currently doing about 18,000 a month. You know, it's very feasible, but that's only gonna grow, because that's just the first phase, right? So pretty soon it's gonna be all of the government, or the tax forms that they produce to everybody, you know, and you're getting into the millions, but it's quite successful, and it fixed them for what they needed to do out of the gate, so.
Okay.
Other questions?
This is Klaus from Austria. I won't go back to the beginning of the set of questions that we have now. As I understood, you have to define a set of rules at the beginning of the pipeline for each type of the documents. So what is, if you have dynamically changed, for example, pie charts or something like that, the alt text of these, how can the machine describe this? And if the layout changes from one side to another, to two sides, for example, it can't work or not.
At a very high level, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And the second question is, which is the bottom line of quantity where it makes sense to use your solution? 10,000 documents a month, or more or less? Or
I don't know if there's so much a set volume. I mean, it all boils down to your cost per copy, right? The software, can start at a very minimal fee, and you can run it on a notebook. Or you could go to a very large application where they're running it on, buckets of servers and co-locations across different countries. And you got to put software in every one of those types of environments. It becomes a different scope, but it does run and will run, on a Windows type environment on a notebook. So it depends.
Doesn't make sense, and that comes from the point of money.
Yeah, that comes down to an ROI from the company involved. So if they're spending $50,000 a year on remediation, when they could spend $50,000 on software or less, that they'll do an ROI and say, well, actually in 2 years time we've saved our money there. But also we can use that software maybe for other streams of our business too. So I don't think we've got the answer to the volume side. It really comes down to talking to the customer saying, how much is this costing you at the moment to do this? How about you just include everybody? You've got 1 million customers and you know that only 10,000 want these, but why don't you just push the same content to everybody? I don't know if you will.
Yeah, and that's a big one again, and I've run into that a few times, where that's what I was trying to address, that whole accommodation versus compliance. If you are going to do, like you say, if you had 1 million of them and you're going to do 5,000 of them or 10,000, at the same point, just do them all, and then you don't have to worry about that.
That's the first question. If the content changes.
If the content changes, again, we have access. It depends on how you want to create the rules. If you want to do it as alt text, then obviously that's a static type place, right? But you can also tag the barcodes as into like naming them what they should be, and then when you pull the information from the database, that would essentially go into one of those areas, and it would read it no different than what's filled on those tables, if that makes any sense.
Would it also be feasible for example, for books? If you have scanned books, PDF, 300 sites of books in a book, and you threw 1 million books through your pipeline.
No, because every book is going to be different, right? So the whole concept of this is having something that's kind of the static or the same presentation level that's going to be the same throughout multiple documents. But when you're that, it creates more of a dynamic or a static. It's just a one-off type thing. It might have a lot of pages, but it's more of a one-off type thing. Now, that's where a little bit different, because we're doing the process a little bit differently. We could use that little barcode on the voice side, and you could use that and essentially have a barcode per page, so you could read the book aloud. And that one you could do fairly easily.
Other questions? Stephen, thank you very much.
All right, guys, thanks.